Hey guys, welcome back. Have my vodka here. It's warm, right? Um, right. Let's start sharing this. So yesterday we did that whole work with pores, right? I added a lot more pores here and everything. But like I said, I mean, like this is a very rough skin, right? It's just like I have all that stuff, but I show you guys how to actually make them a little bit more subtle. And that's exactly what I'm gonna have to do for my little guy here. I spent some time today doing some more research about that type of skin, and it's kind of interesting, because in this case, I was looking at some like close-ups, not like super close-ups, but some of them that I found, and the skin is basically like you got some of the wrinkles and the kind of like the older features and everything, but skin itself, other than some of the like bigger wrinkles, you find kind of like the very thin skin stretching, especially when they smile around this area. They don't have like those old people, type of wrinkles. So I'm gonna try to treat the face almost like as a kid's kind of surface, and then just introduce some of this like larger wrinkles. For example, this guy here, right? It's almost like, see, like it's an interesting type of pattern. But if you look in between them, I mean, like I cannot see a lot of breakup in the surface, like it's like someone super wrinkly. It's mostly like in this area here. It's almost like try to imagine like the thin skin of Siamese cat, So that's kind of like the way I see, kind of like a thin skin. And because of the remember, like when I said that in class that I had no idea how it worked about the fat tissue underneath the skin, and I did some research, and they lose a lot of almost everything, like the fat tissue from underneath. So the fat pads are gone, and that's why you get this kind of like appearance of kind of like the skull, right? Like you can see the skull a little bit more because they totally vanish, and then you can see like the muscles in here, which should be covered with the fat pads, and they don't have that much anymore, So it's like it's a combination of like this thin skin, lack of fat underneath the skin, but not necessarily like a super wrinkly old man skin, So I'm gonna have to keep that in mind. It's gonna be challenging in a way because if you look at certain areas, it's basically like it's a kid's type of skin, It's just like it's soft, but then yeah, there's this anatomical challenges in there. So I'm gonna have be this one is another one. I'm gonna have to keep that in mind, So you see like the wrinkles mostly here, around there, but not necessarily like a bunch of wrinkles in there. For example, this old lady here, I actually had let's see if I can find it here. When I was modeling her, this is like the final render for her. And you see, like, it's not like I'm gonna have to add like a lot of this type of wrinkles, right? Like that's breaking up everything. I'm gonna keep like more like a probably like a little bit smoother like this, right? And then eventually just add some of those kind of like stretchy kind of stuff. But the reason why I have this file open here is that normally what I do, instead of like having to recreate the whole thing from scratch, I just like I like to start from something, at least like the main values and everything, so I can pass them on to you guys, and then we iterate on that, right? Like instead of like basically like what I did when I passed like the first parameters for the skin, the radius and all that stuff is going to basically remain the same, but there are some additional parameters in there. And then obviously with the additional maps that we're going to be painting starting next week, then everything is going to come together. It's like with the reflections, the refractions of the eyes, all that stuff. So for her, what I'm going to do, I'm going to just select her face here, and just like out of curiosity, this is if you never seen the model in 3D, it's super heavy. I mean, even my machine here is super heavy. And the reason why it's so heavy is because everything has fiber, like everything is X-Gen, it's like, and it's a ton of it like that everywhere. So that adds a lot of weight to the whole scene. But then if I remove it, if I just hide the whole X-Gen, is actually much, much lighter than that. But yeah, everything, like look at here, right? Everything here has fibers like that. It's a lot of stuff, but it looks kind of nice in the renders, especially like right there, right? Get the nice little fluff. Yeah, so let's, yeah, this side here too. So let's steal what we can from her skin so we don't have to reinvent it. So I'm just gonna export this. And the reason why I'm gonna export this right now is that I wanted to pass the parameters for the micro bump for you guys. And each new class, I mean, I try different parameters, you know, it's like sometimes it works better in a way, sometimes it works better in another way. And in this case here, this is my whole shader network. We're not gonna be talking about this in detail right now, but you see how small it is? If I count the maps, I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 maps only, right? And out of the 6 maps, you can see that a couple of them are repeated. So for example, like the specular is repeated here and here because it's plugged to the coat and the specular channels. So in fact, I have only 5 different maps total. And other than that, I have a color correction node. That's very handy in Maya if you need to tweak, you know, it's like make the color of the skin a little cooler. I normally like to push it towards bluish. And then we have the cell noise in here, which is going to be our micro bump, which is a procedural map, right? So I'm going to do this. If you have, for example, something like this later on, let's say like after this whole project is done at the end of the month, right? Then you can do, for example, like, oh, I'm going to start the new model. Instead of like having to recreate everything by hand, you can just like select everything and export. So that's what I'm going to do now. I can select all the nodes in here, right? You can just go to File, Export Selected Network. And I'm going to export to Sammy in there inside of Scenes. Let's see, Scenes. And I can just do like old lady skin, something like that. And sorry, not as OBJ, it has to be as my either binary or ASCII. I'm gonna do like a binary. So old lady skin, my binary, okay. And then let's just do this. And let me open my scene now with our little guy. Basically, I'm just stealing the skin from her as a starting point, but not necessarily. I mean, I can just copy some of the parameters over and transfer some of the nodes as well, but not necessarily like stealing everything because each skin is very different. Reason why I don't have like one skin that I always use. For example, like the albino lady, I had to create a shader network that had it was a little bit more complex because I had to add like almost like a layer shader to create the effect of the kind of like shiny, you know, it's like a shadow underneath the eyelids, like the eyebrows, right? Like the makeup, and also for the lipstick. So it was a different shader network. So each model requires something different, you know. So let's just open this guy up. Sammy model 7. That should be exactly where we are at yesterday with that final that test that we did. So its skin is probably very shiny right now, but that's basically like so I don't hide my process, right? I can just restart where we stopped yesterday, which is exactly right here. So it's probably very shiny right now. So the way you re-import that shader network is like this. You go to your hypershade, and one thing you can do from time to time is this. You can do edit, and you can say, let's see, delete unused nodes. That clears up a bunch of things if you're not using certain things. And then let's just import. And then let's go to scenes and import that scene I just exported, which is a old skin right there. So it came up right here, right? So let's do a graph input and output. Oh, did I select everything? I think it's, oh, right here, this one. Sorry, input and output. So this is the whole shader network. And that's basically what I'm going to steal. This is the node I'm looking forward the most. So this cell noise in here. And I'm going to show you later today, actually, how we're going to be using it. But this is to add that little micro breakup in between the skin pores, you know. But for now, we're going to go back to the model itself in ZBrush. And let's try to figure it out, because I know I never know exactly how to figure it out, like what's going to be the intensity and all this stuff. All I know is that it's like there's a lot of pores right now, and we don't need all of that for his type of skin, right? So I can try a couple of different things. I mean, like one option is to go back a couple of resolution levels. I'm already in HD here, right? And start smoothing out things. For example, like smooth out a little bit, go a little bit higher in resolution, the next level, smooth out a little bit until I get something that looks the way I like. Or I can do that faster process that I showed you guys yesterday, which is to create a morph target right here at the highest. So I'm gonna do this first, morph target, store. And then I'm gonna go back one subdivision level so it's faster for me to smooth. I'm gonna switch to my smooth strong. So I'm gonna go, here's brush. And then I'm gonna go, where is it? Smooth, smooth. And then stronger, that one. And so this guy here should actually clear up a lot of stuff. So I'm gonna start like, I'm gonna try with 100%. So it should like really smooth things out. And I'm just gonna do in this area here first, because as you can tell, I still have my little circles in here, right? Some areas are not covered just yet. So I'm just gonna focus in this lower part of the face right now and try to do some work around there. Let's do this, just this masking here. Everything else I'm gonna be doing next. And then when I sculpt the rest of it, if I'm happy with the results, instead of sculpting like this deep, I'm probably gonna switch to a slightly, a little bit shallower pores by using like less intensity when I'm sculpting them. So let's try something like this. I don't even think I need to smooth more in the highest resolution. I think at this point here is gonna be all right. Let's see if it's gonna leave a lot of detail in here. Oh yeah, it's gonna, yeah, I'm gonna smooth it out just to remove those little artifacts. There's a couple of little waves in there as well. I'm gonna try to figure that out. Smooth it out. And then the intention here is to actually recreate them by morphing, right? Just gonna morph them and just gonna try to find a balance that works for this type of skin. And again, like depending on your character, you can keep the way it is. You know, it's like if it's deep the way I had in there, it should work fine once you have everything covered. You know, it's like with the variations added and everything. But in my case here, I don't think it's gonna work for this specific character. That's why I'm gonna go and just smooth things out. And the intention here is gonna be do some sculpting of wrinkles today, and then show the blending between the wrinkles and the pores in those areas. Let's try this. So it's fairly smooth now. It's gonna go back in resolution all the way up. And now I can selectively just bring them back. So let's do like a not Z project, sorry. What did I do here? No, not Z modeler. Morph, Z morph, this guy here. So with the morph, instead of using like a super high intensity, I'm gonna use like a very low intensity. Let's start maybe like with around 5 or something. And then grow my brush here a little bit. And then I'm just gonna slowly recover some of those like that. And remember that this is not the whole story, right? Like we have the micro bumps that's gonna help to actually break this up a little bit further. But I wanna make sure that I have like a subtle kind of effect. I wanna make sure that for a little kid, you know, which has the appearance of an old person, that skin reads a little bit softer overall. And we're gonna do lots of micro wrinkles here and there to help out with direction and all that stuff. Like very slowly, just like rebuilding those areas until I like the depth of them, right? I have to make sure that I don't go too crazy with it. Otherwise, it's gonna look too strong. And I can show you also in Maya, there is a way to actually recreate the displacement map just partially. So for example, you don't need to represent it at full intensity like you have in ZBrush. you can do, for example, like, oh, can you do like 50% of that or 30% of that? And then you can actually create this effect I'm doing here in Maya itself. But the problem with that is that everything else is going to obey the same thing, right? It's going to conform to that. So if you had wrinkles that look perfect, all of a sudden they're going to look too faint, right? It's not going to work. So we have to make sure that it works for everything. So I'm just going to go around here, make sure that I have the pores, but without crazy amount of intensity. There's a little bit of the aspect of the skin that's going to come from the breakup in the specular as well. But for the most part, we're going to trust the forms more than anything else. You know, it's like if you're old school CG artist like I am, I mean, like I started doing this stuff like, I don't even remember. But yeah, it was like, I guess like 2000 when I started playing with this stuff. But then working with CG since like the DOS back in the 90s, right? So it's a long time ago. But character stuff like, yeah, since 2000, 2001, I believe, when ZBrush was starting to become 3D. And back in the day, I mean, like if you remember, we used to simulate all this stuff to create the aspect of the skin, right? Like we would break up the specular a lot and then create this impression that it was kind of like a roughness thing. But that was way before people start coming up with those studies and papers on skin and micro displacement and all that stuff, right? And now we know that the importance of the surface itself to break up and to create the illusion of real skin combined with the right amount of subsurface and all that stuff. But see, now I think it's a little bit more believable for that type of skin instead of like something that looks too strong, which is around there. A shame that I could not finish in there, so I'm gonna have to finish later all those gaps, just finish it up, and then do the same thing. You know, it's like just soften them a little bit more. But let's take a look at those wrinkles in here. I mean, like my model at this point is not like even close to finished or anything, right? So I mean, like this whole area here is gonna change quite a bit. Even like remember when I was mentioning the old lady yesterday, that the eye bag itself is almost like a full creature in itself, right? Like you have the primary, secondary, and tertiary forms in there. It's going to be the same for this guy here. So I have to be careful, for example, because anything I sculpt at this point, I have to make sure that when I move stuff around, that I use like a very broad brush to do those movements. Otherwise, if I use like a small brush, things are going to start stretching, right? And it's going to look very weird and probably going to obliterate the details I'm adding right now if I'm not careful, right? Like if you pull stuff like, sorry, let me get this move brush. So if you pull stuff like that, right, you know something's gonna be wonky in there when you export your displacement. So if you're doing like large movements like that, the first thing I would encourage you guys to do is to go back a couple of resolution levels, for example, right? And do like those movements with a broad brush, even bigger than that, right? Kind of like that. It's almost like trying to build morph targets, right? Or blend shapes. You never do a blend shape by moving stuff like this, right? You don't do that. I mean, like you get like a larger brush and you move that whole area because there is a muscle pulling that whole area when you're building a facial expression, right? Same for the eye. You know, it's like if you have a squint, you're not going to do a squint localized right here in the corner like that, right? You're probably going to pull the eye bag itself in a little bit more like a broad shape, you know, it's like a drag slowly and then build the form in there, right? It's kind of like it's a little bit more of a careful work. So try to imagine like you're sculpting a blend shapes from now on, you know, it's like when you're doing this changes in like the bigger forms. So one thing you're gonna do here, which I forgot, before you start sculpting anything in the eyelids, I'm gonna get out of the HD. And I'm gonna make sure that my loops around the eyelids, right at the edge, they're in a good spot. Doesn't need to be perfect, doesn't need to be like absolutely perfect, but it's very helpful if you have them in place. So the only thing here is that if I get out of my HD right now, I'm gonna lose the ability of doing the, you know, it's like this morph that I'm doing here to test the intensity of the skin. So I'm kind of concerned about that. So let me try to do without getting out of HD first. Let me get to the lowest resolution in HD and see how much I have. Yeah, it's still quite high in here. So it's gonna be hard to control. Well, let's try to do this without changing right now. And then after I'm done with that part, then I can actually, you know, go to the lowest level and actually tweak this line here. What I'm trying to say is that I want to make sure that those loops right here against this edge, we're going to have an edge here, right? And this loop around here, they're actually following, this line is actually following a nice little curvature because later on we're going to need that to be able to place like the all the eyelashes, right? It's going to be very helpful if you have like a line you can select a bunch of polygons in line. It makes things much easier, right? Unless you use like a mask, for example, for your hair density later. But I rather, you know, it's like just select like 2 rows of edges. It makes things easier. But for now, I don't even need to worry too much about it. I'm just going to try to focus in this area lowering here and not so much too close to the eyelid. You know, it's like to the very edge of the eyelid. So we're going to try to be careful with that. And then as I go here, I can start tweaking my secondary forms as well, obviously. So I normally sculpt like my tertiary and secondary kind of like at the same time. Obviously, I have a lot of secondary forms in here, right? Like those bigger folds, right? They're all secondary forms in here. But then when I start adding the smaller folds and wrinkles, I try to make them work with the hierarchy, you know? One thing that's very common is that, for example, like you have a model that doesn't have a lot of secondary forms. So try to imagine this model without like this bigger wrinkles in here. It looks very plasticky. It doesn't have a lot of, you know, tension or anything like that. And then you go and you add like all the fine detail, like all the wrinkles and all the pores and everything. And then you render, you call it done, right? Without thinking too much about the in-between, for example, like those secondary forms. They're actually, they're the glue between like the tertiary, which is the fine detail, and the primary forms. You need to have that glue, you know, otherwise the character doesn't sell as something like believable, you know. So every time you're sculpting super fine detail, try to imagine how those tiny little wrinkles, they are surrounded by bigger and bigger forms. You know, it's like when you're sculpting from a cube, for example, and you subdivide that cube, and then you add a little bit of form here and there, and then you go one step further and you add some more form, and you keep breaking up the form until you have something very complex. Try to imagine that same principle in here. You know, it's like if you have primary forms and they have fine detail on top of it, make sure you have enough variation and deeper and broader wrinkles and forms to create this glue. You know, it's like, so when you look from a certain distance, the characters still look kind of interesting without having to zoom in to be able to see the interesting stuff that's the wrinkles and the pores, right? It has to look interesting from any distance, basically. Like if you're super distant like that and your model is not working, right, then you know that your primary forms are off, so you're gonna have to go back and do something about it. If you're kind of like a midway like this and the model looks boring, it doesn't have like enough interesting stuff going on, you probably know that you're going to need some more secondary forms in there to make things a little bit more interesting. And then only when you get really close, then you can, you know, it's like a show off, right? Like, and your friends like, oh my God, you sculpted all that wrinkles and pores. You're a god, right? All that stuff. So so let's go back here to the eyelids. And one reference that I was looking for was this one here, which is like a simple like Google search brought this one here. So I searched for something like kid eye close-up or something like that, or child eye close-up. So I got like this image in here. And that's kind of like the way I'm going to be treating this little guy, you know. It's like obviously I'm going to get some more wrinkle because his skin is a little different, right? But as an overall rule, I'm going to try to use similar, you know, it's like the translucency is going to be similar. The tones probably going to be similar, very pale. And then there are interesting tones we're going to be painting next week. You know, it's like here you're going to see some magentas and purples. There's some greens and yellows around there as well, right? But overall, we're going to be using this as a reference for those tiny micro wrinkles. And you can always use, for example, do like eye close up, something like that. Or you can even do like a woman. I close up, I think it's gonna be like a softer skin. Men normally have a rougher skin. So it's more like comparable if you do like a, I don't know, like, let's see, young woman. It's more like a kid's skin, almost like it's a softer skin. And then for images here, you can always do like a tools and then size and do like a large. So just filter everything that's like higher res. And it's cool to see that kind of stuff, you know. It's like if you take this one as an example, it's 1300 by 1300. So you can see like those wrinkles are pretty cool. Look at that, right? So you have some crisscrossing going on, but you always have some hero ones, right? So you have some hero ones here creating almost like a double wrinkle in there. And then you have those little stretchy ones around there, right? You have those other ones going around. So like a lot of interesting information in there, which I can use a skin kind of similar to this one. You know, it's like obviously there's makeup involved. So with the makeup, the powdery stuff here is actually making things look very dry, right? But without the makeup, it would blend a little better, would look a little bit less detail, I believe, you know, without the powder. But let's take a look at this. I'm gonna put right here on the side, and I'm gonna keep, let's see, this boy's eye here on the side as well. I just downloaded it. So I'm gonna keep those two references. This one here, right? And let's just drag this one of, no, this one here, hers as well. So I'm gonna be using kind of a combination between that boy's eye and then hers, just for the direction of the wrinkles, basically, for the structure, right? So I'm gonna be using this one and that one. So kind of like a combination of the two. So let's try that. Let's keep this one up around here. And then just for those smaller ones, I can actually start very symmetrically. And then if you, it's up to you at this point, you know, it's like at this point around this area here of the eyes, we are not gonna be adding pores, for example. It's just gonna be like a very generic type of skin that we're gonna add in here. So it's up to you if you wanna break the symmetry in here and add every single wrinkle asymmetrically, or if you wanna do, for example, like just a tiny one symmetrical and then a little bit more hero ones. And by a little bit more hero, I mean those ones here, for example. See like that one right there. And then this one, those more visible ones, right? Those are gonna be a little bit more hero. But let's see if, before you go that way, let me just do a little work around this area here as well. So we're gonna start with this carved brush that I show you guys, Alpha 39, blah, blah, blah. Same thing, I'm gonna keep repeating every time, right? Like a tweaked curvature in there, but it's basically like the default brush, the standard brush with the curvature tweaked for the alpha, and then the alpha is 39 with our stroke at 0.02. So that's my carved brush that I call, right? So this one here is good for, you know, it's like combining things and making like tiny little detail. So for example, like if I want to create wrinkles, normally what I do, instead of like going with a line that's, for example, like a boring line that would go, for example, let me do like a strong here so you can see. If I go for something like this, and I think like, oh yeah, that's a wrinkle right there, I would not construct something that goes across everything without respecting any hierarchy or logic in there, right? So what I'm gonna do, instead of doing that straight line, I'm gonna go to a lower intensity like that, and I'm gonna play a game of connecting the dots in here. You see, I'm still symmetrical at this point. I'm gonna keep symmetrical a little bit in here, and I'm gonna go to my highest resolution for it. So 35 million should show in there. Let's see, yeah. So here, I'm gonna go with a smaller brush, and I'm gonna try to play this game of connecting the dots. So I'm gonna try to, from time to time, I start with a few of them, try to connect, and then I change and I connect some other ones. And I keep doing this, kind of like breaking up this line, you know, instead of like a boring straight line, you're actually gonna create the wrinkles by connecting things, right? It's basically like trying to imagine like, just like we had with the couch when we were, you know, it's like using that example of the couch. You know, it's like as though the surface gets a little bit thinner and thinner, more flexible in between those pores, they tend to actually connect to each other, right? So they kind of like reach towards each other. And then from time to time, you can actually change the direction in here and go like outwards like that, for example. Just like bring some of those those lines. Let me do around here. So basically like from here, just connect a little bit, like, you know, add some more directionality to it. Let's get a little bit more towards here. I can create like a little bit more of parallel here. So slowly you start building this, and then you can go a little bit bigger as well. Just to create that. And so that's one way to do it. I mean, like I use this same thing like for those directions that I need to add like around this area. So for example, if I go around here, I'm gonna add like some bigger ones like that. Folding and then starting to go towards here. Right? So the intention here is to do this. I'm gonna do very strongly here. The intention here is gonna be to create wrinkles coming this way, and then wrinkles coming that way as well. So, but I'm gonna do this in a very subtle way. So there's another brush that I'm gonna show you. That's a very, it's a very simple solution. It works very nicely for the most part. You can, nothing stops you guys from doing exactly what I'm doing here, just like sculpting everything manually, just with those micro wrinkles. It's gonna be quite a bit of work. But for this kind of stuff, I like to use this brush here. Let's see if I have it here. It should be skin cell, skin bump, skin pores random, skin, let's see, which one? Skin random, this one. Let's see, skin random 1 and 2. Which one's this one? Okay. So this one is basically the standard brush. Again, you start with the standard, pick the standard brush, and then do a clone, right? And then you plug this alpha here, which comes with ZBrush. I don't remember its name, but you can definitely see in there. I don't remember what's the name of it. And then for the stroke here, you switch from dots to color to spray. So not color spray, it's just spray. And then here you're gonna have like, this is the default values, like 0.5, scale 1, 0.5, and then 0.25. Sometimes it's good if you tweak this last value here to get a little bit less continuity. I mean, like if it's too much, you know, it's like just to get a little bit less than that. I'm gonna try to use it here just to see what's doing. Actually, it's working fine. So the way it works is like this. If you work with the brush directionally, it creates this type of effect, right? So you can do this kind of stuff, which is very useful. But then there is another way to use it, which is like using circular motion. I actually spoke about this in my ZBrush Summit in 2018, if you ever watched the video on YouTube. So basically, like if you're using circles like this, you create this type of leathery kind of pattern. But the thing is, if you're using circles, it's better if you use like with a lower intensity and maybe with a little bit less flow. So let's try it instead of 0.25, 0.10 here. And you see, like now I can use in circles like that. And then as long as you don't go over the same area over and over again, you can get this very interesting leathery kind of surface, you know? So this I'm gonna be using to cover a lot of stuff. For example, like the back of the head, the sides of the face, a lot of stuff in the ears. It's all using this very simple solution in here, you know? So I'm gonna go back to my intensity a little bit higher. Let's try at 8 or something like that. And I'm gonna start just like brushing directionally from here. Let's see if it's too strong. It's a little bit, not too bad. It's like if you don't wanna compete with the pores themselves, make sure that you have an intensity that's not actually erasing the pores themselves, right? Which brings me to another thing, which is if you use any brush started from a standard brush, it's very much likely that if you use it too much in an area, you're going to start like basically erasing all the detail that's behind it, right? But there is an option, which is to, instead of like using the standard brush as your starting point, you can use the elastic brush. The elastic brush is an interesting one because it does this. Look at how interesting. This was a friend from Ireland back in the day, Frank Gravatt, actually introduced me to this brush. And I was like, I don't like this brush. But then after he showed me how to use it, I actually started liking it quite a lot. So by default, it does this weird thing, right? It's like, what's this elastic brush? That sucks, right? But then check this out. If I reduce the intensity from 87, which is the default, to around like 30, for example, right? Still, if I do the movement over and over on top of the same spot, it looks very weird. But if you use this in layers, always never going back and forth in the same, basically like you go from top to bottom, release, top to bottom again, release, top to bottom. If you keep doing this, you can build up forms without losing any detail. So all the detail is preserved, unlike the standard brush, which obliterates everything, right? So this brush is very, very useful for, you know, it's like if later on, if you want to recreate, for example, like secondary forms, but you already have all your tertiary, you know, it's like already applied. There are a couple of options, right? Like you can either go back a couple of resolution levels and then sculpt in there. And then obviously when you go to the highest, everything's going to adapt and conform to it. Or you can sculpt like using an elastic brush like that and get things done as well, you know? So my point about the elastic brush is this. So let's say you pick the elastic brush. You can go to brush and then say clone, right? So now I have a copy of it, says elastic one. And I can do the same thing. I can assign that spray. I'm gonna put like the same flow that I had in there before, 0.1 or something. And then here for the alpha, I'm gonna get that same alpha, right? And let's see the difference now. So for example, I'm gonna get a similar effect. Actually, I have to reverse it. So I'm gonna put C sub. It's a similar effect. For all intents and purposes, looks the same, right? Doesn't look anything different from the other one. The difference here is that you can go over and over the same area with it, and it shouldn't delete the detail that you have. For example, if I start going over this area here, it's going to add all this detail, but it's going to preserve the pores in between. You see the pores are still visible in there. So that's actually, I never save those. You know, sometimes I demonstrate stuff and I'm so lazy, I just don't save it. I'm going to save this one actually. Let's do brush, save as, and I'm going to go to my C program files, Pixel Logic. Let's get 2021. 2021, right? Yeah. And then I'm going to save as Z startup and then brush presets. Let's do this one. I have pores, let's see, skin random. Let's do skin random, elastic, like that. So now next time I start ZBrush, it should be there. So for the intensity, they're going to go a little bit lower. You have to remember that since it's an elastic brush, the intensity is not equivalent to the standard brush. Standard brush, for example, I can use like 8, and here going to have to be over 20 to be able to see the effect. So, but now I can actually go, you're going to see how subtle everything looks. And I'm going to try to do this coming from the center, kind of like more vertically around here, the center. Right, more vertically. And then I start like, kind of like almost like fanning it out right here, like tapering. So I'm going to start changing the direction more towards the side, right there. Same around here, close to the lips. The lips is going to be interesting because you're going to be sculpting those micro wrinkles by hand in there. So it's going to be a cool exercise here. So you see, like, very slowly we start adding a little bit more interesting detail to the pores. Otherwise, the pores themselves, they do not sustain, right? Like it's it doesn't look realistic, right? It just looks like it's weird. But as you start actually organizing things and putting some glue in between, see, like now I'm gonna do like very strongly so you can see what I'm doing. So basically, like I start like very vertically. Oh, that's too strong. Very vertically around here, right? And then angling more and more towards this. That's basically what I'm doing right now. But I'm doing this like in a very, very subtle way and making sure that the pores themselves are not getting destroyed in the process. I need the pores to be the glue in there. So the intention is to do those tiny little ones and then go back and then do some manual sculpting with some more hero ones. But for now, I'm just gonna be adding those guys to create this illusion that the skin is a little bit more stretched, right? I'm gonna be using this around this area here to create this stretch as well. So I can go a little bit stronger. Actually, I'm gonna go not so strong, and I'm gonna add like the main ones by hand. Just gonna add like this micro stretch like this. And I'm gonna try to stretch the pores themselves by sculpting a little line on top of each one. And I'm just gonna keep going around here. Let's try that. Creating this little breakup. So now we have those tiny little lines, right? They're kind of like starting to kind of connect things in there a little bit. Around the nose here, you can actually play with it. You can do this direction here, like towards the nose itself. And then you can use that little circular motion that I mentioned to create this kind of leathery pattern to start blending things. And I'm gonna use this one a lot, like I said, you know, it's like just in circular motions like that. Just create this, it's almost like you don't need the pores to be there, but you need the surface to be broken up a little bit, you know? So just to create this organic feel to it, just like in circles like that. And this is all using the elastic one, right? We kind of abandoned the standard for now. There you go. So now we have like this whole area around the mouth here, going in kind of like in the perpendicular direction from the fibers of the muscle, right? The muscle fibers are kind of like a circle like that. So I'm kind of going perpendicular to that, creating this almost like sun rays in there, right? And now we're gonna come from another direction. So I'm gonna come from, basically I'm gonna increase the intensity so you can see it, but I'm gonna come now from this direction here. Basically, that's what I'm gonna be doing, all the way to the chin, like that. But I'm gonna do, again, like a very, very subtle way. If I need to increase the intensity, this has to be built layer by layer. And instead of like trying to nail, you know, it's like in a single scoop, because if you try, then it's more likely you're probably gonna force your hand a little bit too much. So just gonna go like maybe like 25 for my intensity, 25, 24. And then I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna do, you know, create those little lines. It's like micro wrinkles, just crossing everything here. And then later we're gonna test this to a little render to see how this is rendering in Maya. So I'm gonna go from here all the way. And at this point here, we're still working on the, almost like the blocking stage of the skin, right? We are covering it with all the pores, and then now starting to add some directionality and micro wrinkles. But then later, we're gonna actually add some of the more hero wrinkles, right? Like to get some of the nice effect. For example, this area here is gonna have some wrinkles here to add the more interesting stuff. So let's try this here. So now I have like this crisscrossing going on. So basically like it comes from out and in, and then same from the other direction. So it creates this little crisscrossing. And then here, I could potentially like change direction a little bit just to make sure that they read. Let's see if I'm gonna make strong again for you to see something like this, you know, it's like that follows this direction here towards the mouth. Almost like it starts almost like as a curvature here, following the zygomatic muscle in there from underneath. So I'm gonna try to add a little bit of that direction, and maybe a little bit stronger than what I had before. Let's try at 0.28, 7, something like that. Let's do some of those wrinkles around here. I really don't want to go like overboard with the intensity of my wrinkles, right? Because again, like I want to keep like in this, you know, kind of kid world, like in terms of intensity for the skin. Some of that in there. And then here, let's see what we can do with those pores now. So instead of using this micro tiny displacement effect in here that we are just doing right now. I'm gonna add, like, use my carve brush, and I'm actually gonna connect some of those manually. So I'm gonna do, for example, like I'm gonna create a little line. That's, oh, that's too strong. Let's go maybe like at 12, something like that. Let's see. So little lines like that. I'm gonna cross this line right in the middle of the pore itself. And I'm gonna try to stretch it a little bit. And then create a little bit of in-betweens from time to time and try to create this little effect that things are starting to stretch a little bit. Always like in the same direction, right? Like if I'm going that way, for example, that's the direction I'm gonna be. So basically, like I'm using the pressure sensitivity, right? And just starting a little bit deeper in the middle of the pore and then going a little bit lighter towards the, you know, the surrounding area. So now I can actually do a little bit of this connected dots thing, right? Like go towards each other here. And then if it's looking a little too boring, you can add a little bit of diagonal as well. If it's looking like everything is stretching perfectly the same direction, you can actually just add a little bit of, you know, diagonal to each one. So they're kind of like offset instead of like going spot on towards each other. Let's add another one right there. So like slowly you're gonna start building a little bit more of this kind of direction happening in there, right? But yeah, let's go back in here and build a little bit more of this area. You see, like at this point, I'm still working in symmetry, right? It's optional, like I said. As long as you have the pores in place, you can abandon symmetry anytime you want, and then just like do the wrinkles completely asymmetrical if you want, you know? But in my case here, I'm being lazy and just like, I know that the bigger wrinkles are the ones that are gonna catch the eye and make sure that things are very asymmetrical, but those little ones shouldn't be a big problem anyway. So I'm adding like little ones like this, trying to find some pores in the middle of the way and just connect them. I'm gonna just like from time to time, just bring it out a little bit. And then I can even cross towards here and start looking for other pores where they can connect to, right? But this whole area here, it has to look like organic, right? From time to time, you can even cross directions like this. So create a little bit more of this effect. And then eventually we're gonna look, from time to time, we're gonna be doing this. We're gonna look from a certain distance like that. And if it completely disappears, then we know that we have some room to add like some heroes from time to time, something that from a bigger distance you can actually see. So for example, if I have a bigger wrinkle in there, right? That adds a little bit like it catches your eye. Every time you're sculpting anything, try to trick your brain to stop repeating patterns too much, right? One thing is to model something like I'm doing here. You see like there's direction going, you know, trying to add some variation to those wrinkles the way they are forming here. And the other thing is to do this, look. That's a pattern, right? And it gets very, very boring very, very soon. So if you're sculpting stuff, for example, like around the mouth, we're gonna be sculpting some of those micro wrinkles later, right? Like try to avoid that kind of stuff. Like repetition is a no-no because the eye really looks for those things, you know, it's like it's unconscious. As soon as you see a pattern, your eye locks in there and then it falls apart, you know, it's like things just don't work. So make sure that when you're sculpting those things, you're actually looking for ways out of the pattern. So basically like, you know, it's like break the pattern right there. I'm kind of like that line that I was following there, I'm starting to break it right here. And then introduce some others coming from a different direction from time to time, right? Just to, you know, introduce some interesting detail without too much repetition, you know, because that's the part that makes everything look fake at the end. So just like, you know, make sure that things are looking a little bit more natural. I might need some more pores in here, that area, because I kind of like erased most of the pores in there. But you see like around here, starting to look a little bit more organic. but I can actually bring some in there. Let's look around this area here, for example, the nose. You can do the same thing around here. So again, like instead of going that pattern that can go all the way around here, I can make it more interesting by looking for, you know, neighbor pores, for example, like this, and then trying to connect some of them, but without following like a perfect line. So basically, like from time to time, I just pick a few. Oh, yes, there goes ZBrush shooting across the whole model, and the bug is never fixed. So we're gonna do that. So a couple of wrinkles in here. When I get to this area here, what happens with older people, I'm gonna turn off my symmetry right now. I hope I don't forget. But with older people, what happens, there is a wrinkle that's created here. I'm gonna create for this little guy too. I'm not gonna be adding too much, but I'm gonna try to connect some dots around here. See, like trying to look for some of those pores and connect them. And I had gone like with a single wrinkle, it would look very boring, right? But instead I'm choosing to actually do like multiple little like parallel wrinkles, right? And try to connect some of those dots and create a little bit of an effect in there. And then right in the middle here, I can go from a distance right here, right? Something a little bit more distant, and create some deeper ones. So like some hero ones. So this one I can see from a certain distance right around here, right? And then, oh, here goes ZBrush again, cutting the mesh. I'm glad I'm catching those, because sometimes if you don't catch them, you're like 2 hours in and then you see those lines across the whole mesh. And I was like, oh, that sucks. But now, so I have like some of those hero ones. I can go back in there and I can add like some tiny support ones on the side. So almost like this. Imagine like everything, it's kind of like a bunch of waves, right? Like, so you're gonna have like some major wrinkles, and then you're gonna have some tiny ones, and then tinier ones. So basically like it propagates, right? So this hierarchy, you have to respect across the whole mesh. This is gonna be true for between like primary, secondary, and tertiary forms. It's gonna be true for this type of wrinkles, you know, it's like you're gonna have the small ones and the big ones. And then from time to time, if it's too boring, for example, like going always the same direction, you can cut across and introduce a little bit more interesting forms, create a little bit of this crisscrossing that I mentioned before. Just like to introduce a little bit more interesting detail in there. So you see like just tiny little things like that. Obviously, you're only gonna see what's going on when you're actually rendering it. And then if in the render you're not seeing anything, you know that you can go a little bit stronger. Oh, it just shoot across again. What I'm gonna do to prevent this, because it's shooting across the model all the time, I'm gonna just go to stroke, lazy mouse, gonna turn it off. And then when you turn it off, it's not as nice. Sometimes you get some dotted lines. This one is actually working fine. So at least now we don't have that problem anymore. It's not gonna shoot across the whole mesh. So that kind of detail, you know, just add a little thing that when you see from a certain distance, it adds a little bit, you know, of interest. So we're gonna be doing similar stuff for eyes, and then areas like around here, right? So this is a good candidate to have some of those. So I'm gonna make a little stronger one, cutting across. And basically, like if it's too linear right here, instead of like continue going the same line, I'm gonna break it, go a little bit offset like that. And then break it again. And kind of like, you know, just like add some parallel ones. So I have a little bit more of an interesting line in there. Same deal. Create like a little bit of secondary ones, just like propagating from that first wave in there. That kind of stuff, you know. So that's basically like those little things add a lot, you know. It's like in the context, after we have a lot more of them, You know, it's like with the lips and everything, the eyelid, eye bags, or you know, the lower eyelids. Then we're gonna be able to see how this works. Let's break the symmetry. It's already broken right now, but let's just add a little bit more depth to those lines in here. And I'm noticing actually, if I go to the lowest resolution here, I can go way deeper with this whole area here in the nasolabial. It looks very flat at this point. So I think I can go like deeper overall with it. Just gonna carve this a little bit more. I'm at the lowest resolution of my HD right now. I kind of went down. And then I'm gonna use that elastic brush that I mentioned before. And I'm gonna try that trick, kind of like, instead of like building up, I'm gonna use Alt just to go down here. Just remove some of that form. And like I said, don't go zigzagging, right? It's just like one pass, top to bottom, another one, top to bottom. And then you can do that. You can reduce the volume in there doing that. If you do carefully, you can actually get what you need. And you see, like, one thing that happens with the human face as well is that even when you add like all those variations and stuff, you know, it still looks very plain overall, like the forms. So from time to time, it's nice if you can break the surface by adding some kind of, I'm not going to say like a micro noise or something, but a little larger, you know, kind of like even with the elastic brush here, if I just go around at this area here, for example, and I start introducing asymmetrically right now, just introducing some of those little lines and breaking up the surface, it starts to look a little bit more organic from a distance, you know. Otherwise, it looks very plain, kind of like there's nothing to happening there. And then obviously you can sculpt, like, you know, put little scars like this. So you see around here, you're gonna put a little scar in there. So like little, you know, it's like indentations in the skin. And chin, for example, can always add a little bit of those. It gives the impression that someone is actually contracting, right? Like all those muscles in the chin, if you do that. So it sometimes it affects the facial expression quite a lot. So if you do like just very softly, you should be fine. But just adding this type of imperfection in the skin, you know, it's like micro scars and bumps and bruises, you can actually get a little bit more naturalistic look instead of something that looks completely plain like this, right? Imagine you just like add pores in there and you call it done. It doesn't quite look like that, right? The best way I would say is to get scan data, right? Like that website I point you guys to, this 3D scan store, and then look at those scans, you know, it's like how the surface itself breaks up. So let's go back here. Let's do some work in the eyes now. So for the eyes, I'm gonna do a combination of things, right? I'm gonna be using that new brush we just created. So this is the elastic brush for the micro wrinkles. And I'm gonna do a similar work that I did down there in the chin that's gonna be around here, the eye. So I'm gonna try to follow this direction here, coming from here to here, right? Like from inside of the inner part of the eye, all the way out like that. So I'm gonna start right here. And I'm gonna bring those little guys like that. Just like very, and then I can cross a little bit, kind of like in slightly different angle, just to introduce a little bit more. And I'm gonna continue doing that around here towards the pores. Just like very, very carefully, and you know, it's like it's a subtle effect. Once everything is mixed together, you see I'm mixing around here, start to mix with the pores themselves. Once everything is mixed, things start to work. Getting that little effect in there. So same thing here, gonna go towards the outer part. And then I'm gonna kind of flare it and fan around the eye. Same deal, you know, it's like it's this perpendicular direction from the muscle fibers again. So I'm gonna start From here, I'm gonna go towards the eyelid as well. In this case here, I'm doing kind of like a zigzag, right? I go down, release, up, release, down, release, up, release to create this pattern. So I'm gonna keep like doing this, covering this entire area. And then when you get to the eyelids, I mean, like the eyelids, they have all kinds of motion. And then we're probably gonna have to start adding the opposite direction in here for those micro wrinkles. But for here, I'm just gonna keep doing the same deal. And then around this area here, we're gonna start going towards the center. And I mean, like this area is very, very crunchy still, right? So let's just do a little bit of that morph I had before. So let's do like morph here, just like morph this back to, oh, actually it's the opposite, right? I have to actually smooth it out first, smooth stronger. Let's smooth that first and then bring some of them back. Same here. That's the thing, you know, it's like if I was just working by myself without teaching, I would probably finish the work first and then do this. But I can tell that there's some redo in my future because I'm trying to keep going with the class. But not ideal what I'm doing here, mixing like a combination of super deep ones and very shallow ones. You can definitely tell that I'm gonna have some extra work to do in there. But it's okay, I'm learning too. So a little bit deeper in there. And then let's go back to random. And then you see right here, I start going towards the center. And those micro wrinkles, they are gonna be very interesting when you get to this bridge of the nose in here. I'm gonna turn off my symmetry and I'm gonna just go across. Let's see, around here, across, then across again. And then I'm gonna pick my my carve brush and I'm gonna pick some of them to be more hero in there. But those are gonna be like the micro ones in between. And then the same way I was doing that, I'm gonna start bringing the direction down towards the tip of the nose in here. So we create this kind of like direction all the way around. And the cool thing is that if we need to do more of that using the same brush now, as the elastic brush, we know it's not going to destroy anything that's underneath. So even if you have wrinkles and stuff, you're still going to be able to, you know, it's like combine them and merge things together. So right now we see like it's a very subtle effect, right? It's very helpful in a way because first it's giving the directionality, right? So we know that the bigger wrinkle is going to have to follow a very similar direction. And also, they're gonna work as kind of like the in-between for all those bigger wrinkles, right? So everything works out. So around here, I'm gonna go a little bit stronger with my pressure and just get those two really mix with the pores themselves. So around here, they're gonna really start to mix with the pores. I'm just gonna put the happy tree right here. Kind of like, you know, every time I'm describing my process, I'm remembering the old videos, right? Like, I'm just gonna put a happy tree right here. I'm gonna put the happy wrinkle right here and the happy pore too. Yeah, so basically like just make sure that you're blending enough, you know, it's like the pores and wrinkles here. But again, this is just like a kind of like a tiny little detail, which is gonna be just part of it, but we're gonna be adding like bigger stuff, obviously. So for the eyelids, I can actually, now that I have this direction everywhere in there, I'm gonna go like in a different direction. I'm gonna start from the inside here, and I'm gonna go towards the eyelid itself. So create a little bit of this direction, back and forth. And then again, I'm gonna, you know, add some hero wrinkles in there, so don't worry too much about it. But creating this crisscrossing here helps with the way that the specular is gonna hit it. is going to add a little bit more of an interesting catch for the speck. And here I'm starting to cross the opposite direction. Around there. Same for this area here. Let's make sure that you have density enough so they're not all super spread out. So this kind of detail here for like a younger skin, I think is going to be more interesting than the pores themselves. Like I might have to actually reduce the intensity of the pores again and just like add more of those micro wrinkles and trust that they're going to be doing the job more than anything else, you know. Obviously, I don't know exactly how this is going to work once the micro displacement or micro bump is in place, because it's going to add a little extra layer of detail in there as well, right? But at this point here, if your model has enough resolution, for example, mine is like only 70 million polygons, but let's say yours has 100 million polygons, you might get away with sculpting the micro bump in here in displacement, you know? It's like you can go further. What I'm doing here, you can push further, for example, and you start doing like all the crossing like that, like the little patterning, right? And then you might get away with like just having pure displacement, you know, but I still encourage to use the bump. You always get a little bit more extra. So now that we have that in place, let's do paint a couple of wrinkles in here. I'm gonna turn off my symmetry, and then I'm gonna start doing some of that. So you can start with, let's say, in my referencing here, I can see there is one that starts around here. So I'm gonna start like very, not so deep first. Let me just mark it around here. And then right underneath here, I'm gonna try to break up this line into a couple of like multiple ones. So I'm gonna do like let's see if I do a little bit closer for you to see. So I'm gonna get this guy, cut it across here. But then again, instead of like going a straight line all the way, I start one a little bit higher now. Cut it across there. And I keep going with this one here, a little bit longer. Sometimes you get super thin ones. I can increase my intensity a little bit and go with like super thin ones. So let's get one around here. Thinner and a little bit longer. And then let's see which ones maybe around here. Again, like start a little straight and then break it up and create a little bit of a change in direction for it. And then again, like from a certain distance, if you're seeing it from this distance, you're good. If you're not seeing that much, you can actually reinforce it a little bit, because you should be able to see things respecting that hierarchy I said, right? From a certain distance, we should be able to discern what's like secondary from tertiary form. So it's important that they are deep enough. So let's say you have this one, I can actually continue, get another one a little bit more parallel right around here. And then from this distance, I can see it and dig a little bit deeper. And then right around here, I'm gonna start breaking up, because you have to understand that there is a facial expression, right? So with the facial expression, with the squinting here, everything is being compressed towards this centered line here. So it comes from outside towards there. And then you're gonna get some extra, you know, wrinkling happening that direction. But, you know, it's a matter of like what you have for your model, obviously. If it's a neutral pose, then you probably can get away with other stuff. I'm gonna turn on my lazy mouse again, because I'm starting to see some dotted lines in there that don't like it, but I'm gonna have to pay attention if it's gonna shoot across my entire model here or not. So, you know, very slowly building those hero type of wrinkles, and to make sure that they don't read like super straight lines, I can cross over, make kind of like little crossing like that, just to break up that little surface a little bit and look like they're forming a little bit more of like a random way. actually, it's like there's a path of least resistance here, but at the same time, not something that's absolutely perfect, right? Like it breaks up and it splits in certain areas and things like that. Then around here, I'm gonna keep going with some micro in here and then towards same direction. And then when I get around here, right, I can just go straight. This shader here, it's hard to see from certain angles, but from here. So again, like I'm gonna have to make sure that my wrinkles are not deep enough, because otherwise it's gonna start looking very old, right? And that's not what we want. We want his underlying structure to look old, like in the sense that you can see the skull and the muscles and everything, and barely like any fat tissue underneath the skin. But in terms of the skin itself, as we can see in those pictures, I mean, like they don't look super old, right? In terms of skin itself, it still has that kind of like kid quality to it, mixed with it's a weird thing. It's not like an adult skin, which would be the in between, right? At least what we imagine, like in between like a child and an old man. But it's kind of like a bizarre thing. It kind of like bypasses the adult part, so it has this look of kid's skin with some old man under structure. It's very bizarre. Not bizarre because it's ugly. It's bizarre because it's just unusual. That's what I mean. I think those kids are pretty amazing, and it's quite inspiring to pay homage to them, actually, to do that. Such short lives, it's like it's pretty sad. I'm glad more of you guys are doing some of other kids with progeria as well. It's going to be cool to release like an art bomb an art bomb on the interwebs, just with lots of art portraying them. Probably it's not going to have a huge impact, right? The first one of you guys who posts it online, I mean, that's going to steal the show. And then the other one's going to be like, oh my God, are you copying that guy? Because he just posted it, man. It's like, God damn it, I was teaching that. No, just kidding. It's going to be okay. We're going to do like a art bomb on like ZBrush Central or something. That would be cool, actually. So you see, like, slowly you start building up, and then it's all about the hierarchy, right? So I have like the super tiny details I start sculpting. Now I'm adding, it's like slightly bigger, right? Those ones still read a little bit like scratches, right? Sometimes if you have compression, instead of like representing things as a scratch, it's better if you actually build up the form around them. So if I get like an alpha, let's say 3070 here for my clay buildup, and I go a couple of subdivision levels lower in here, I can actually build some of those areas. For example, around here, right? If I went for like an older person, I would probably like sculpting something like a little bit more baggy like that, right? But in this case here, I'm probably gonna do like just this in those larger areas. I'm gonna do like symmetrically here because I want this part to affect the other side as well. And then later I'm gonna break it up. But I mean, like just to get this back, and it's the best brush, it's like if you use the clay buildup with a little round alpha, you can get a lot of those forms. And they are very good for building those little bridges that I call, like those guys here, for example. We're gonna do like strongly so you can see it. But if you have like a cavity, like in a wrinkle like that, it's very good to actually build like a bridge between them by using clay buildup, It really creates this tension. So I use it a lot for this type of area. Create like this little effect, that the skin is actually stretching in between two areas, like covering like a gap like that. So when I get around here, I'm just gonna build up a few of those kind of crossing that little line. So when you look from a distance, it's gonna look like, okay, yeah, it feels like the skin is stretching over it. And again, like the only thing I have to be careful is that things don't read too parallel or too even, right? So maybe from time to time, you can actually just combine a few like that and create like a bigger form. So it doesn't look like a perfect pattern. Let's try that around here. All right, so slowly building up those forms. And then I'm gonna try to get some of the wrinkles a little bit deeper as well, because right now they're kind of, you know, starting to get there in terms of the hierarchy I mentioned. But, you know, it's like around areas like this would be nice if we could read some bigger wrinkles, let's say around here. Just gonna get a little bit deeper. Still using that same method of breaking things up. If I go closer, connect some of those little dots. We're trying to go a little deeper overall. Not everywhere. If you're doing this in one area, just leave the other ones the way they are, you know, so they can be used as variations. And also for this form that I have in here, it's a little bit boring right now. You see, like I have the wrinkle in there, but it's not like the wrinkle is actually tucked in, like underneath. So it would be more interesting if I had a little bit deeper, you know. So for example, if I go here, let's try to dig both sides a little bit deeper with a larger brush. Let's see, a larger brush and a smaller intensity. Let's see what happens. Something like that. Just gonna carve that. Especially in this corner here, you get like a sharper line. And then for the form itself, I can actually make sure that this reads very thin, but with enough tension and roundness. So that, I mean, like I'm not even looking at references right now. So doing this blindly, it might be stupid, right? Because, you know, I have to look and see what type of wrinkling I'm gonna get in there, especially around this area. But for now, we're just like playing around. Let's go back to my reference. It's been a while since I looked at him, and I know that the likeness is quite away, and a lot of the likeness is gonna come from this nice little teeth underneath, which is really cool. Now there is a question though. This I think was later in life when he was a little bit older, right? And then there is this, I think that this was pretty close from his death, right? So he looks older and older right there. This one, for example, he still looks a little bit like a little kid, right? So kind of like there's a gap in age, I believe, between those pictures. And then I'm still like trying to figure out which one I'm gonna go with. I kind of like this one. He's older in here, right? And I don't know if if it is indeed him in this one here, or if it's a different kid. It says Sam, but you know, it might be him or some other kid. But very interesting if it is him. You know, it's like the development of like you know, it's like the cranium, how he started. It looks like it might be him because the cranium looks pretty similar. You know, the development. You know, it's like how he went like from a very kind of like a normal kind of look, right, around here, and then to something more like that, right, like losing the hair, you know, those veins and everything, the head shape changing to this, right, and then all of a sudden to that, and then later on in life, right there, right. Very interesting, like the progress, especially like nose and yeah. So it's gonna be interesting. This is the one I fell in love with. You know, I love this picture, man, because he has like all his toys in there. You know, I don't know if it's his room or something, but he looks like, you know, a bunch of Legos in there, and this little old man in the middle. You know, which in fact is just a little kid. It's pretty interesting and touching. So let's see. Let's get him in there. So let's look at, you know, it's like I'm doing a little bit of everything at the same time in here. I'm gonna be doing something here about the wrinkles. They are not very well resolved at this point. So I'm gonna try to incorporate some of that. Obviously, when I'm carving those wrinkles here, is gonna end up like messing up a little bit with with pores that I have underneath, but I don't mind like rebuilding them. But what I'm seeing here in my reference is that there is a wrinkle that starts around here, and it kind of like hides underneath here. So basically like starts around there, comes around here, can actually make a little bit more like bring it back a little bit like that. It's gonna be a little bit more asymmetrical. So that's the first one I see in there. And then as it hides underneath here, it's basically like following the line of the zygomatic muscle underneath. So there is another one here that adds tension. So I'm gonna carve this a little bit deeper. That's gonna be a deeper wrinkle right around here. And it's gonna split those two forms. So we're gonna have like this one that shows more tension in here. And this one's gonna go all the way across, and I'm gonna have to build up this volume from here to here. And then this guy actually extends, goes a little bit higher, so all the way into around here. And then that side has also that area deeper. So I have a wrinkle carved right around here. So that's the strong one that splits around here. Oops, I forgot that my intensity for my smooth brush is very, very super high. And then, like I said before, I mean, like if you have those strong ones, those strong forms, like the main ones, you're definitely gonna have some ripple happening around them. So as you know, as you can see in the picture, so this is the main one, but there's one in here that's just a small echo of that. So you're just gonna have a tiny little pseudo wrinkle right there. And then from time to time, you can use the clay build up and then build in between those wrinkles, right? So just like build this form a little bit more. And then at all times, go back and forth, you know, it's like kind of like a little bit more distant like that, and see if the intensity is okay, if it's really too strong. From this angle here, it looked very nice and round, but then from here you see there is some wobble happening there. So I'm gonna just correct that. I'm gonna bring this wrinkle slightly like that. Make sure that everything is a little bit more even. Make sure that the forms are clean. You know, it's like the worst thing is to have like a lot of wobbly stuff. So you have like a line it's not like continuous. You know, it's like it's completely broken up, and so make sure that your forms are clean when you're sculpting. It's very important. You know, it's like to have this. It's almost like, you know, you enter like an office, someone's office, and then everything's a gigantic mess. You have that impression, right? It's the same with when you see like a sculpture that has a lot of lumps, and then you was like, huh, so this person's a little messy, you know, could be a little bit better about cleaning up that mess. So that's how I see it, you know, and it just like it adds more of that, you know, it's like maintain things a little bit more consistent, and it's part of your style too, you know, it's like the way that you're gonna build the wrinkles and the way that you carve everything, you know, it's like it's very particular. I mean, like everybody has a different touch for sculpture, right? So I can give you the same subject. If all of us are sculpting the very same subject, each one of you are gonna come with a different way of sculpting it, and each one of you are gonna have like a different look for the pores and wrinkles and all that stuff. And no matter how much we try, like that's what it is, you know. It's like it's you know, we are different. We just have different sensibilities for stuff. Just gonna do this one here is a tricky one because I can see that. See, like that's one thing I didn't notice before. But his nasal labial, when it comes to this area around here, it becomes very shallow. So I'm gonna actually. That's the thing, you know. It's like I'm kind of basing myself too much on the same character, and I made myself a promise not to, because otherwise, again, like likeness can be a tricky thing if you're doing something, you know, it's like a class that's like a paid class, right? It's not something it's not like a fan art at this point, right? If there's profit involved, then it's like copyright and all that stuff. But I'm gonna keep pushing as far as I can, and then I still have the intention to send the parents, it's like a message and ask if they're okay with me doing this. If they are not, then I can just switch to a completely, not completely, but not be the same guy at least. I hope they're okay. It would be nice, like, to pay homage to Sam himself, But I totally understand. Like, this involves like people's lives and feelings, right? Like someone who's part of their lives, It's like it's a tricky subject. You never know how people are gonna take it. When I sculpted Stan Winston, right? That was a different thing because I was not teaching a class. It was just like a fan art, and I sculpted Stan. And then what happened is that I posted on Instagram, and then I think it was Stan's son-in-law who saw the work, and he showed his family actually, and later they sent me a message actually. It's like I got that interview at the Stan Winston school, right? Like they interviewed me for the website in the blog, and it was very cool actually. But what they said is that they are actually showing to the grandsons, and it's like everybody in the family are seeing the stuff I did, and some people are a little teary and stuff, which was really cool, to be able to touch someone with your work, like in a different level, It's like it's pretty nice. Although the model itself, I'm not like a huge fan because I never completely finished. I can improve the likeness quite a bit, but yeah, I'm gonna have to do another pass on it and improve the model. I still want to do that, but it's very cool. It's like that. In that case, they totally accepted it, and not only that, they are the owners of a school of visual effects, right? Like special effects, and they actually were super nice to promote my own school. It's like they plugged my school in there. I was like, oh, how nice of them. So yeah, it was very sweet. And it's the kind of stuff I did not, it's like to look for, it's like a recognition or easy followers by doing something more pop culture, right? It's just because like I was at that point sculpting like my heroes, it's like people who actually inspired me. When I was a banker in Brazil, I it's like I was a fan of movies and everything, but when I watched Jurassic Park, for example, I watched Jurassic Park and I watched like Terminator 2, and those two movies made me want to work in this industry, And then turns out that Stan, he actually his studio helped to build like all the maquettes for the T-Rex and all those guys. They build like the large models for the T-Rex too, and we have at ILM, it's like those models these days. And then obviously I'm not going to work these days because we're working from home, but that was my daily life, It's like pass by those sculptures and see that stuff, and I'm always inspired, So I decided to sculpt him. But I tell it's like people sometimes like if you really want some easy followers, just do pop culture stuff, That's the way to go. Like do some, especially like if there is a Joker movie, just model a Joker, If it's like all they want is like video game stuff, like do lots of Nintendo characters and whatever, it's like Sega characters, and you should be good, It's like do something. Oh, the realistic version of it, right? Like you have like some characters like South Park, Simpsons, whatever it is, build like some fucked up realistic versions of them, and it's guaranteed you're gonna get lots of followers too. But I'm not at that level at this point. But maybe one day I'm gonna appeal and try to get some easy followers out there. But I try to be honest with the stuff I want to model. It's like with if I'm in the mood without like, oh yeah, I'm gonna model just for the sake of getting more likes. I don't like that stuff. It's a little weird. But I understand the purpose. I mean, like I'm running a class right now, and it would be very cool. It's like if I got more followers, so I potentially could sell more classes, right? Since this is a little business. But I just can't, man. It's just, I don't know. Maybe one day. Nothing against, people are doing their thing.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah,
I have a question.
yeah.
Do you ever get out of the HD mode to improve the likeness, or now on you just cooked on the HD mode on the
No,
lowest level?
no, all the time. I keep going back and forth.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm just like at this point trying to stay in here because I still have that morph target saved, and
Okay.
and I'm kind of like insecure to tell you the truth, you know, it's like about the depth of the pores and everything. But I think I'm gonna stop being a wuss here. I'm gonna go out. Let me get out of it, and so I can show you. Yeah, I keep going back and forth, especially like when I keep tweaking the likeness further. So I can go like, you know, all the way down here. But I would say, let's say something around here would be very helpful to tweak the likeness a little bit. I can do some of that now. I see that there is a little bit of asymmetry in his face. One thing I can do, for example, at this point, I can export this mesh. So let's export the backup version here. Let's try F. Forgot. Sammy, OBJ. Let's export this one as a base mesh, lower res 4. Actually, this one is mid res. It's at 69, so mid res 4. So that's my backup if something goes wrong. But at this point here, since I already have most of that area covered with the detail I wanted, I can start playing with my asymmetry here for the facial expression. And if I need to go back and sculpt everything symmetrically, I can always refer to that model I just saved and just like use the deformation smart resim and then enter HD with everything symmetrical. But at this point here for this study, I can play, for example, I noticed that his mouth, the corners, obviously another thing you can do is to go to your transform and use the posable symmetry. It's not like 100%, you know, you cannot trust that much, but it helps like for a good part of the time. So I noticed like the corner of the mouths in here, they're kind of flat in his case. They don't go, there's not a lot of that little depth in there. And then also, gets a little deeper maybe around there, and then a little bit further here, motivated by the zygomatic muscle from underneath. So I'm gonna just like tweak the angle of the mouth in here. So I'm gonna raise this area here a little bit, very slowly. I'm gonna bring this little down like that. And his teeth, I mean, like this teeth here, I brought from a previous model, like I mentioned before. And I'm gonna be showing you guys how I built them. But obviously we're not gonna do like a full-on class on how to build teeth. I'm gonna show you like the principles and everything that I did so you can have some ideas about it and also share the shaders later. But the thing is, the shaders are not great at this point, so I have to work more on them. So I'm gonna add more volume to the lips in here, especially from this angle. I'm just gonna introduce some more volume. You're very thin in the corners. Just gonna get this. I could potentially like hide everything, go inside of the mouth and do that from the inside. But for now, I'm just gonna bring this. If there's too much curvature in here, I'm gonna just bring a little bit more flat and introduce a little bit more volume internally. And this volume has to go all the way until it basically touches the gums from the underneath here. Something like that. Because remember, like as you smile, normally like this whole area here gets thinner, right? Like because there's a compression of the, you know, the lips against the teeth and the gums. So I'm gonna make things a little bit more flat. Just to introduce a little bit more of a, and then here, like the lower part, I noticed that the corner from the inside, let me do something here. Like if you go to render and then preview shadows, you can actually turn this off like that or down so you can see more. Otherwise it gets too dark in there. So now I can see a little bit more. So let's try this. I'm gonna bring this corner, just the inside part, more towards me here. I can use like the Alt button to just help me to move stuff in the direction of the normals. interesting that, yeah, there's a little web in there. I'm gonna try to fix that. Let's do something like this, and then just hide everything else. Just click solo, right? Let's see from the inside here. It's a little messy in there. I'm gonna bring this. Let's see. This pocket here. Oops. I'm gonna get this pocket, a little bit more of this pocket revealed around here. Something like that. And then hide the backing here. And maybe the neck too. Let's get this corner. It looks a little funky right there. It's kind of stuff that it doesn't bother if there's no facial expression, right? But as soon as you start sculpting a facial expression, if things are too out of place, then anything that's too messy doesn't work. So you have to start actually tweaking it. Now I actually reverse that, but now I'm gonna have to fix that corner. Let's get this one up. Something like that. At least it's a little bit less tangled now. And if you're getting too much trouble there trying to join those things, you can always use a little inflate brush. But again, it has to be kind of small intensity, right? Otherwise, things start like crossing inside and becoming a little bit weird. I still think that I can bring this up from the inside right there. It's fairly stretched. Yeah, it's fairly stretched. I'm gonna have to do later on like a, another pass with more care for that area. It's at this point it's actually forcing it to go back because of the direction of the my edges in there. But yeah, it should be good enough for this. Something like that. And then let's get this a little bit higher. It definitely like, look what happened in there. It's not symmetrical anymore at this point in here. So that's the problem about breaking up the symmetry too soon, right? Because that kind of stuff I could solve much easier if it was completely symmetrical. But now it's too late. Let's keep it symmetrical. All right, so let's get back to here. Let's get back to my little teeth, which is gonna be much more interesting once he has his teeth completely asymmetrical as well. I noticed that this side of the mouth is a little bit lower. I'm gonna bring it down with the bigger brush like that. Gonna be cool to add that little crooked smile. And then a little bit lower around here. Something like that. Now for this, this folding here that I mentioned before, that's very discreet in my reference, I'm gonna try to smooth it out a little bit and use some clay buildup just to fill up this area here, and almost like you raise his nasolabial just in the connection with the nose in here. Because I noticed that in his face, I mean, like it kind of like appears and disappears in there. So I'm gonna make this area a little bit flatter as well. I don't know, it might be just the photo I'm seeing right now, but it kind of looks like that. Maybe if I see some other references and I notice that, yeah, it has to come back, maybe I can just reintroduce it. But it's gonna be like this puzzle, you know, trying to find like the reference that make more and more like him until I decide that I shouldn't be modeling him and then everything's gone. But let's see. He also has like more volume on the sides of the nose, which is very interesting. In certain pictures, looks like he has more of that. In some other ones, looks like less. But I think based on that one, it definitely has a little bit more volume in here on the sides. Let's see what time it is. It's 10:39. Let's do something. I'm gonna do a little bit more sculpting here in those secondary forms, and then we're gonna bring this back to Maya a little quick render just to check those forms we just did for the chin, just to see if some of those little details came through or if they are still too little, you know. Let's get this chin here a little bit more pointy as well around there, not so square. And the nose a little bit higher here. So yeah, the likeness, I'm gonna be tweaking this likeness here like all the way until like the last minute, because that's basically what I do every time, you know. It's like you keep going with it and then seeing different things and then tweaking. And it's actually good that you get lost with the secondary and tertiary details at some point, so you can actually rest your eye, you know. It's like you don't need to freak out too much about like nailing the likeness. And then once you do a lot of that, you get that out of the way, then you start like focusing on the likeness again. It was like, oh yeah, now I can see there's a lot in here I can actually improve. So that's basically my plan, you know. It's like to, you know, probably gonna do some more work on the likeness tonight since I started here. And but then go back to the details, you know, and get more stuff done. So let's try to export this guy. Let's do that whole process so you guys can remember. There's someone who actually had a problem with the displacement. I don't remember. I saw it like very quickly today, but I'm gonna go through this whole process again so you can see again how it's done. Okay, so go to the lowest, actually to the second resolution, instead of like the lowest, one subdivision level higher than the lowest, right? So that's subdivision level 2. So you're gonna export this one as your MR. So your mid-resolution number, we're gonna name it number 5 now. And I'm gonna go to the lowest level now. I'm gonna export again. And then that's gonna be my mid-res, actually my lower res 5. So LR5. And now I'm gonna do that trick. This is very important. So again, delete any morph target you might have. So click store, click switch one time, and click import. And you're gonna import your lower resolution, so LR5. That's it. Now save your file or your scene, whatever you wanna save. I'm gonna save my project, which is around 1 gigabyte right now. And I show you why it's 1 gigabyte. It shouldn't be that high, but it is because something I'm doing here. Just saving it to prevent, like, if there's any bug in the middle of the export, at least you don't lose everything. So you see what I have here. I have my base mesh. I have a copy of it, which is the previous version, kind of like a sketch, looks a little funny, huh? And then I have a bunch of other models here. Look at what they are. Basically, like, they are textures from my previous model, which is like the albino lady. So those are the textures I had. So it's just like the specular, and you know, it's like the albedo and things like that. So those are just like in here as placeholders. So you can actually, when you're actually painting them, we have all the meshes in place. They're basically the same mesh, just duplicated with the poly paint on them. So okay, so I have the base mesh in here. Let's just export those maps. So let's go to multi-map exporter again. And then the settings look like this: 8K, 12 in here. Switch MT has to be on. File names have to be UDIM. And then displacement settings, subdivision level 2, not 1, not 3, subdivision level 2, right? Because that's the model we exported to Maya. Remember, in Maya, we're going to be importing the resolution level 2, not the resolution level 1. And then 2 here, adaptive, 4, mid from 0.5 we brought down to 0, and then 32 in the XR. Once you have those settings saved like this, you don't have to do it again. ZBrush saves it for you. So let's just do this. I'm gonna save to source images inside of my Maya folder. And it's gonna be called base mesh LR5 for all the maps, right? And it should take about, I think, like 2.5 minutes it took yesterday. So it should be around the same. You see the naming here, it says output 0, right? Like in the subtool name. That's a temporary name that he names in there. So if something goes wrong, then you know, like if all the maps are exported at the end and the name is still output something, that means that something went wrong. And like I said, you know, before, if you are in that situation, don't ever save and overwrite your previous scene. Otherwise, you just like screw the whole thing up. Because at this point, your UVs are busted. All kinds of crap happen at this point already, if that's the case. If after the export, you still have an output in here. So don't do anything. Just like close that file and, you know, one thing you can do maybe is just, I don't even know if it's worth like exporting the OBJ at that point because the UV is busted. Maybe just like for the forms, right? But not necessarily for the UVs. The UV is going to have to transfer back. So let's go back to Maya here and set up the scene so we can actually render this guy. So this is the model here, right? And remember, like I said, once you have this set up with your middle resolution meshing here, you don't need to do anything else. For example, like set again all those settings that we did yesterday, the shared SSS, subdivision levels, all that stuff, right? Once you have this set, we don't need to do it again. Instead of like importing the mesh in here and simply rendering the new mesh, we're gonna be using the mesh to morph target to this one, like to blend shape it. And then that's gonna be basically the same mesh we're gonna be using, you know? It's just conforming to the new one, basically. So the thing I'm gonna be doing here, I'm gonna be stealing this cell noise here. I'm just gonna rename, I don't know if I can rename here. Yeah, cell noise 4. So cell noise 4. So let's get, if you wanna source like multiple shaders, you can do this. Let's see, skin temp is the skin shader for his face, right? And then if you shift and then press the old lady here, right? I have a different one. I'm just gonna go to graph, input and output connections, and now I have both shaders in here. I have the skin temp, which is his skin, and then the old lady that I just stole in there. So I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna get my cell noise and this bumping here. And I can even create a duplicate of them, you know. Let's do this like edit and then duplicate shader networks. So shader network. So I do that. So now I have all those nodes in here copied. I don't need this one for now. This is like the bump height mesh map. I just need the cell noise itself. So I'm just gonna plug this one here. So let's see. If I click the model itself and I go to the shader, should be the last tab. Here's settings for the SSS and everything. If you go to where it says geometry, this is where you're gonna be plugging your bump mapping here, right? So the way it works is like this. You can just do like click this little box and you can just pick, for example, like in this case, if it's the cell noise, it's gonna be located in under Arnold down there, texture, AI cell noise. That's the one you need, right? But in this case here, since I already have it, I'm just gonna drag it. I'm gonna drop right there. And then once you plug this map, it's gonna tell you, okay, you have to connect something to something because I'm not understanding what you wanna do here. So basically what you can do, you can actually go to alt color, and then you can, for example, like plug something to something else. So I'm gonna get like the color G, for example, which is green. And I can plug this color G to the bump value in here. So I'm gonna plug that one to this, right? And that should be good. So if I close it now, so that's plugged. So I have it plugged right there. So in this case here, let's see how it's plugged. Just to make sure, like this guy here. So out color, oops, this one here. So yeah, it's plugged from the G going to the bump value. So basically like what we had before, we are having it here now. So let's, now that we have that set, let's go to the skin shader again. So it's plugged in there. The parameters for the AI cell noise that I'm using so far is like in the drop down, alligator gives an interesting result, but it's kind of like it's a little rocky looking. But you have like this noise too in here. And I think by default, it has additive turned on, and that actually prevents it from working correctly. So turn it off, and then you just change the settings for those ones, like octaves 8, this 1.195, amplitude 1, and then scale 40 for this, you know. Maybe you're gonna need to change this value here, but I don't know. And then let's do a little render. You know, it's like one thing we can do, we can actually remove the displacement map. And to remove the displacement map or disconnect temporarily, you can do just this. So you have like your shader here, right? Or you can just click the model if you want to make sure. Click the model, go to graph materials on selected objects. So you have everything in there. And then you have your displacement plugged to the displacement channel in there. You can just select this little arrow here and just delete it. Later you can just reconnect it. But now you should have the displacement completely disconnected. So you should be able to see just the bump map, what's doing here. So let's do Arnold render view. That's going to be the next step, is to have this little micro bump in there so you can see what's going on. And then there's another trick here to actually be able to see everything. Let's see if it's going to render first. Right, so it's rendering there. So at this point here, it has the subsurface scattering, right? So it's not going to be easy to see what's going on in terms of you know, the tiny little detail. But there are a couple of things here you can use to be able to see things a little bit more clearly. So if you go to your render settings, this little icon here, right? If you go to the last tab, so you know, you have the common in there, you have your Arnold settings. If you go to diagnostics, oops. If you go to diagnostics, you can turn off stuff. So for example, like if you turn off your subsurface scattering here, if you try to render now, you're only going to see the specular, right? So let's try something here. Let's do, instead of like rendering this dome light, let's try with area lights, the other lighting setup we have, which should be easier to see. And let's try like a close-up somewhere here. Let's try. I think I need more reflection, to tell you the truth, because it's a little bit fuzzy. So let's do, let's tweak this shader here a little bit. Let's go to coat and roughness. Actually, I'm gonna remove the coat altogether for now. 0.25. And then I'm just gonna reduce the roughness here. And then increase the weight. Let's try to render that. Oh, a lot of stuff was actually coming from the roughness channel, from the coat channel. So let's see. Interesting. So let's get the coat again. But I don't want the coat to be, yeah, okay. So I'm gonna get it very shiny. So kind of like very mirror-like. Yeah, I wanted to get like an area like maybe the nose. Something like that. Let's see if we can see any, it's kind of hard to see any of this bump. So I'm not seeing anything right now. Let's see, go back here to my shader and then click my cell noise. Should have all the parameters in there. Remember, it's the, seems like the additive has to be on. Remember, like, let's see if my intensity, the bump depth, is too much.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
Does the basic like render view thing under debug shading, does it show bump or only displacement?
That's a good question, because like I managed to get like to show one or the other one, but it's a little buggy. I think like I was flipping some of those buttons, and then at some point I was able to see just the displacement, and then I was able to see just the bump. But it kind of like it's flaky, you know. It's like sometimes it doesn't show it, so it's hard. So one thing I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna switch like from AI cell noise, from noise to, I'm gonna put like alligator, because it's easier to see what's going on. If you have alligator, I think you're gonna be able to see the effect. Let's try with like 20 here. Yeah, I'm kind of like seeing a little bit better now, but still not showing the effect. Let's try to bring back my subsurface here. Let's just see what's going on. Yeah, I'm not seeing it. The whole purpose of bringing it was to actually bring steal the, you know, that effect in there, but it's not working. So let's try, let's see, render. But don't worry, I mean, like if I don't get it to work right now, I can actually just find out what's the setting that I'm missing, and then I can point to you guys tomorrow. But yeah, I just want to make sure that I have it set so the micro bump works with whatever displacement we are bringing from Maya. So for now, I think I'm gonna ignore it for now, and then I can pass you guys the setting after I test it. And I want to make sure that I have a lighting setup that actually is you know, pointing straight away to the nose area, for example, so you can see it. So for now, let's just do this. Let's plug the maps that ZBrush just exported, 2.5 minutes, right? And let's bring the new model as well to show you guys what's the process. So let's say like you're working in this model here, doing all your renders, but you just finished a new sculpture in ZBrush. So make sure you're matching the same poly count, right? So number of faces 69,304. Not my base mesh, right? But rather the second, you know, it's funny, it's showing like 69,306 in there. Am I missing something? I hope not, because here shows like 304. That's weird. So let's try import, and then let's go to OBJ, and OBJ in here as well. And then I'm gonna get my MR, right? MR is gonna be, if I select it here, 69,304, and then the other base mesh 69,304. So they match. For some reason, ZBrush shows 69,304, 306. Actually, it's right there. Actually, it's the vertices is 306. The faces is 304. That's weird. Anyway, so I have like the new one down here and the old one up there, right? So the way it works for the blend shapes is like this. You select the new one first, and then you select the old one. And you can just go to under your modeling tab or animation, go to deform, and then you create a blend shape. So if you click the option box in here, you can give a name, AAAA, something like that, very specific. And then you just click create, right? So now you're gonna have a tab right here that says this. So you're gonna have like your AAA in the weight in here. So you're gonna just crank it, and it's gonna conform, right? Gonna conform to the new mesh right there. So now that it's conformed to the new mesh, next step is to actually go to edit, delete by type, not delete all by type, delete by type, and then history. And now it's baked. So now I can actually remove the new one, and that's all baked into the old one. Like all the forms from the new one baked into the old one. So that's what we're gonna be doing from here on. Even after you have hair and eyelashes and everything, eyebrows, that's what we're gonna be doing. Before you do that, if you have a ton of hair though, is to hide all the hair and then do the blend shape and then turn it on again. Otherwise, it takes forever just like to be able to dial the slide, you know, it's like it kind of like drags, it's pretty slow. And now let's plug back our displacement map, which we unplugged in here. So the displacement map is right here. All you have to do, click this little button. From here, let's see, scale. Actually, let's do like this. If I click this one here, just click and drag with the middle button right here, and you should plug the displacement from here to there, right? It's kind of easier. And then we still have to reload textures. So we're gonna click the texture itself right there. Another way is to click the model, go to your skin shader, right? Click this little arrow here, and it goes back to the displacement. And then you can click and then select another map. So let's do the new mapping here, which is this one, can be any one of them. And because I already have UDIM set in here, you already found the 3 tiles, and everything else should be good to go. So you don't need to do that Arnold turn off, you know, auto, you know, TX textures or turn off the filter. It's just gonna be iteration, right? So now it's plugged, and now we can try to do a little render. Let's see how this lighting setup behaves with, let's see, just to make sure that I have everything, not ignoring subsurface. Let's do an actual render. Like that. Let's do 1:1. And then one thing I had to do, remember like when I was showing it to you guys the first time we did some renders, it was getting a little bit too noisy, right? Especially in the subsurface areas. So what I did here was actually to go to the Arnold render. And then one thing you can do is to crank the SSS in here. So if you're getting a lot of noise, specifically in the subsurface areas, for example, like if you're zooming in, and then, for example, like in the nose or something like that, you're seeing a ton of noise. So there's like lots of dark spots. Let's do a quick test just to show you. I'm gonna turn off my progressive render, and I'm gonna render just a little piece like that, for example. Now it's super shiny, right? Because you changed the shader. But let me show you this. So you see like, it's not too bad. There's not a lot of noise right now. But if you're having a lot of dark little dots right there in the subsurface, you can always crank this SSS specific channel here or subdivider, right? A couple of times. So for example, like maybe 4 or 5 like this, like a 5. Now you should get like a much smoother result for the subsurface itself, you know. But if it's looking okay, try to keep it as low as possible, obviously. So let's try that specific area we had, which was kind of like the chin in here. I want to make sure that we can see the stuff we sculpted today. Let's see around here. Let's see if we can see it like that. It's very shiny as well, so it's going to be hard to see. Let's try just in this area around here. I have to kind of like spin around my lighting setup a little bit just to get a little kind of like a glancing angle. Yeah, it looks very shiny still, but I'm seeing the little ones, like the more vertical ones in there, starting to appear, which is good. And then another thing that we forgot to mention is that remember that you know, it's like I mentioned that if you use the subsurface in the auto bump, things can improve the look, but it's not by much. For example, like if I store this one and I turn it on just for you guys to see, for example, under advanced in here, use auto bump in SSS, right? So if I click this one, you're probably not going to see a ton of difference between this and this one. Let's see. But this one is supposed to actually calculate like the subsurface, even in the tiny, super small details, you know, and produce a more realistic results. But in practice, I mean, like sometimes it's overkill. I can compare like this one and this one, see if we can see any difference between this and this. Not much, right? Maybe later when we have like all the fine detail in place and maybe like I don't have a lot of this plastic look of my spec in here, maybe we're gonna be able to see better, but it might be overkill and it adds a lot of time in the render. So I'm gonna keep it off for now. Now, one thing that makes a difference is this. So if I go to my model, the second tab, and I click my Arnold again, if you go down to the subdivision levels, I have 4 iterations, right? If I go to 5, for example, I might get a better result, but it's gonna take longer to render because it has to subdivide once more. So just gonna compare here, so store snapshot, and then I'm gonna render again. It's gonna take a little bit longer just to calculate everything. But we should be able to see a little bit of a difference between the quality of the pores overall, because instead of like moving things to the bump, it's actually gonna try to render things with the subdivision itself. And then for the deeper pores and other things, you can actually see a difference, you know. Maybe like my render setting here is not like the best to show that difference, but we're gonna try. Let's see what happens. Still calculating, I mean. Remember, it has to subdivide the mesh like 5 times virtually before it can start rendering anything. So it might be a little heavy. Let's see if it's gonna show a big difference or a tiny difference. Okay, so it's rendering now. Yeah, it's very small at this point. I can see some stuff moving around, but it's a very tiny difference, just in a few spots. It might be more representative once you have everything in place, but maybe like keeping at 4 is a better bet. It's going to be way faster to render the whole thing. You know, it's like if you have 4 subdivisions. I would actually start with 3, but you're definitely going to see a difference between 3 and 4. So 4 would be ideal, but if your machine is actually having trouble, maybe start with 3 subdivisions. Yeah, it's not going to have a ton of difference right there. All right, yeah. So let's just get this one here. And then I'm going to figure out what's wrong with my micro bump in there. And then once I have like everything set, should get like a few minutes, I should figure it out. I just don't want to torture you guys, you know, trying to find and bug track stuff like in real time. I'd rather do this on my own time and then pass the information to you guys. But yeah, so for now, that's basically like what I want to cover is like a little bit of this blending between the wrinkles and the pores. Was good that you guys asked about the, you know, going back to the primary and secondary forms outside of HD. So as you can see, at any time, I'm gonna keep doing this forever. You know, it's like going back to the lowest, second lowest, or, you know, and all the way to full HD and keep tweaking all those forms. And then the important thing to take from this one today, I think, is this thing about like training your eye to look stuff from different distances, you know. You should be able to see certain things like, you know, those details that I just sculpted around the eye bags in there. I might have to make one of them a little bit deeper so you can see from a certain distance, right? But there's so much stuff, for example, like this guy here, when he's smiling, I can definitely see a little bit of an old man kind of wrinkling happening there, right? Still like with kind of like a kid kind of skin around here, but definitely like the wrinkling here. It's even like magnified by the glasses, obviously, but you know, there's yeah, very interesting. So I'm gonna have to keep going with those ones in there. But yeah, guys, keep working on your pores and wrinkles and all that stuff, and we keep the conversation going. You saw what I did today. I mean, like my pores originally look very, very deep, right? So I managed to do that. Let's do a preview here. Do that, kind of like raise everything a little bit more. That means that I cannot go back to that previous stage, right? Like because that morph target is gone by now. So if I need to do anything at this point, I'm gonna have to resculpt, right? But I think it's gonna be okay. I think I can get away. And then obviously some of those pores, I'm gonna pick like individual ones to make some of them a little deeper. You know, it's like when we get to that point of like adding more variation to the skin overall, then we're gonna get to that juicy part. But yep, that's it for today, guys. Do you have questions? Sorry, I waited to the last minute to ask.
Yeah, there is I remember back in time in Maya when we brought displacement map, we had to change alpha gain and alpha offset in the file node. Do we still need to do that, or no? With the export setting we are using in ZBrush, we don't need to do that.
No, you don't need to do it. I remember like when I used to use V-Ray, I had to do like it would be like 1, right? And then mine was 0.5.
Yes.
So I had to compensate for the offset. In this case here, you don't do any of that. But it's like you get the map straight to Maya. And then if you have 0 set for your export, it should match it. It should be perfect.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. All right, guys, I'm gonna let you go, and I'm gonna keep working a little bit more on this guy here because I think it's gonna get a little bit more tight as we go, right? Like you're gonna be, I mean, like it's just a lot of content and stuff that I have to go through, but always exciting, you know. It's like just to create something with you guys, you know. It's like sharing information with the fellow artists and stuff. So it's cool because it's nice to see like the evolution of your work as well. And mine as well, because I never know where those models are gonna go, right? Like you just like started and you change your mind and then things change. But it's I think the process is always more interesting than the final result most of the time. But hopefully gonna be able to create something cool at the end as well. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
too.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.